Welcome, everyone, to Unfiltered with Sam. Scott Ritter is joining us today as we're going to talk about the events unfolding in Syria and try to make sense of it for you. Scott, welcome. And it's nice to see you after the
Thank you very
Thanksgiving
much.
break. Scott, I wanted
Thanks.
to get into the events in Syria by touching upon them from this in that barely 24 hours after the surprising ceasefire in Lebanon, surprising in that the day prior Tel Aviv was being heavily attacked by Hezbollah, Syria falls into chaos. So only someone living in a cave would consider the timing of the Syria events to be accidental. Far from it. There's lots of actors who are connected to the events, but specifically, what's the role of Israel with regards to the crisis in Syria?
I'm always loath to opine on issues, especially to somebody who lives in the region who has fingers on the pulse. I'm very far away, and such, but I'll answer the question. But I just hope your audience understands that I'd like to be a lot closer and talk to more people before I weigh in decisively. But I personally think that Israel has played a very big role in this. My understanding of the ceasefire was that it was not that Israel defeated Hezbollah, but that it was Israel, the Israeli military, that was very concerned about their ability to sustain a losing battle with Hezbollah, that they were not defeating Hezbollah, and that this was going to break the back of the Israeli military, and they were able to get Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire. It's not something that Netanyahu wanted to agree to. Um, Hezbollah, um, to be honest, has also suffered losses. I mean, the loss of Hassan Nasrallah, a charismatic leader who's been ruling Hezbollah since governing over Hezbollah since 1992. You can't replace somebody like Nasrallah. And the people that they did try to replace him with were likewise killed by Israel. It caused disruption at the leadership level. And that's more than just a resistance movement. People need to understand that Hezbollah is also a political party, part of the Lebanese government. Therefore, they have responsibilities to go beyond simply issues of resistance, but issues of state, issues that pertain to the totality of Lebanon. Um, and now you have people who aren't named Hassan Nasrallah now worried about Hezbollah's hold, on political power. Hezbollah is now weakened politically inside Lebanon. The Hezbollah, as a resistance movement, has shown tremendous resilience. They fought Israel to a literal standstill in southern Lebanon, defeating Israel on the ground on almost every occasion where they had a decisive conflict. And Hezbollah's rockets, far from being destroyed by the Israeli Air Force, were hitting Tel Aviv up until, as you said, up until the last moment. Hezbollah was not defeated militarily. Politically, Hezbollah was in a bind. Early on in this conflict, the Lebanese people, including Christians, Sunnis, Druze, uh, appeared to be supportive of Hezbollah's support for the people of Gaza, that it was a just fight. But one of the reasons why is that they weren't paying a price. Um, they weren't being targeted. When Israel decided to begin the bombardment of southern Beirut and to strike, Lebanese population centers, killing thousands of Lebanese civilians, innocent Lebanese civilians. Um, this was pain that the Lebanese nation could not sustain, and was not willing to sustain. And so there was political pressure being put on Hezbollah by Lebanon to bring an end to this conflict because it was bad for Lebanon. And Hezbollah, as a political entity, part of the government, weakened because of the loss of Hassan Nasrallah, um, believed that to continue this resistance um, would only diminish its political power in Lebanon. So they agreed to the ceasefire. But let's be sure that this wasn't that Hezbollah was defeated. This was that there was a new political reality emerging in Lebanon, and that Israel was desperate for a ceasefire situation. Let's focus on, see, if Israel was smart, they'd focus on Hezbollah's political problems, and try to exploit that. That's the best way to neutralize Hezbollah, is to focus on Hezbollah's political weakness and now in the aftermath of Nasrallah. But Israel isn't smart. Israel wants to physically destroy Hezbollah. Again, not understanding that Hezbollah is part of Lebanon. They are the Lebanese people. And the best way is to diminish the the potential of resistance among the Lebanese people. But instead, they focus on the resistance. They want to destroy Hezbollah, which means that they have to destroy that which enables Hezbollah physically to resist. Here we have the so-called axis of resistance. We have Iran at the top. And as far as Hezbollah is concerned, Iran coordinates closely with Syria. I don't want to give history lessons to people who live in the region. I always feel embarrassed in doing this, but I'll do this for the benefit of people who might be watching who aren't part of
Please,
this.
yes.
You know, when you take a look, Syria, and again, I'm not going to pretend that I am some theologian who knows everything about religion, but the Assad family is Alawite. Alawite is an offshoot of the Shia faith. But rather, before people say, well, that automatically means that Syria and Iran are good. No, the purists in the Shia community view the Alawites as heretical, as not true Shia, not true practitioners of the faith, just like they do with the Houthi Ansarallah. They are not purists as far as the Shia are concerned. But when the in the time of the revolution, Shia clerics from Iran were sent to the Shia population of the South, and they developed a very close relationship, intermarriage and things. So the connectivity of Lebanese families with Iranian families, especially at the clerical level, was real. And when the revolution occurred, and the Israelis began, Litani, you had the Lebanese civil war, you had the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. It wasn't necessarily that it was official policy on the part of the Iranian government. It was that families supported, and these family members that were supporting happened to be Revolutionary Guard families and members of the cleric who would support their families. This was a familial thing in southern Lebanon that turned into official Iranian policy. But the link between Iran and the Shia of southern Lebanon is a real, genuine link. It's not an artificial link. It's not a link brought about by geopolitics and people drawing lines on maps. It's based upon personal connectivity. It's very, very real. Syria was a close ally of Iran during the Iran-Iraq War. A lot of people maybe don't recognize that, but Syria provided tremendous support to Iran. They provided Scud missiles. They provided military support, political support, and the Iranians never forgot that. And so when it came time to help Lebanon, Syria became the conduit for this help, both in terms of, uh, basically Iran would fly in equipment to Damascus, and then the equipment would make it across the border. Later on, as the situation with Iraq changed in a post-Saddam environment, Iran was able to create a land corridor going up through Iran into Al-Qaim over to Abu Kamal, and then through a land corridor into Lebanon. And that's where a lot of this equipment comes into. And it's this land corridor that we want to focus on right now. Israel has already threatened. I think Iran brought in an aircraft, tried to land in Damascus the other day, and Israel said, we'll shoot it down. So Israel's already trying to shut down the air component of this resupply to Hezbollah. Now, to starve Hezbollah completely, they have to shut down the land corridor. In order to do that, they can do the bombing of Abu Kamal, which they have done, but that isn't as effective. It's not as thorough. They wanted to physically cut the corridor. In order to do that, they have to have resources. Those resources are in the form of the Al-Qaeda offshoots that currently reside in Idlib. How they got to Idlib is a long story, but the bottom line is they used to be everywhere. The Russians intervened, came in and defeated them. And part of the deal to save their lives, they were evacuated to Idlib with their family. And that's where they are concentrated. Turkey backs them. Turkey brought in a lot of Turkic people from the Uyghurs from China, Turkmen, and from around Central Asia, brought them in, radicalized them, armed them, equipped them, made them into this sort of a Islamic state of Idlib. Um, so Israel's always been working with Turkey. The notion that Turkey was against Israel is just politics. Erdogan has never been against Israel. Erdogan is a strategic ally of Israel. People need to understand that if Israel ever does launch a massive air attack against Iran, it's going to happen because um, Israeli pilots would fly to Turkey, to Konya, and then use the large bombing ranges in Anatolia to fly the distances that replicate this. Turkey's always worked with Israel to facilitate an attack against Iran. Turkey has worked with Azerbaijan to bring in Israel to operate bases out of Azerbaijan, which are used to attack Iran, to facilitate assassinations, to facilitate human intelligence collection, etc. All done out of Azerbaijan. That's Turkish-Israeli intelligence cooperation. The Israelis operate freely in northern Iraq because of Israel. Uh,
Turkey.
because of Turkey and the Kurds. There's this intimate relationship there that is the reality of this. So Israel has been coordinating with Turkey on cutting this corridor. The timing of this was important. And this is where the United States and Ukraine and Turkey come into play. If you've seen, Turkey has been saying things. Turkey is not happy about the Russian victory in Ukraine. Not happy at all. Turkey has publicly said that Crimea belongs to Ukraine and that Russia can't have any of these territories. But there's nothing Turkey can do directly there. They provided Ukraine with weaponry. And then Turkey also has to worry about, Turk Stream and the role that Russian gas through Turk Stream plays in Turkey fulfilling its goal of becoming an energy hub for the region. So they can't totally alienate Russia. This is why they bought into the Astana process that led to the pacification or the end of the fighting in 2020. I think it was when it was signed. But the
2017
point is
was
2017, but I think 2020 was when
right.
another ceasefire was brokered using the Astana process.
Exactly.
Because I think in 2020 you had a crisis where Russia bombed a Turkish military column coming down in support of the HTS fighters who were violating the agreement, and that led to further brokering. But again, Turkey has never been an enemy of Israel. I think we need to say this straight up. They're allies. They work together. Um, Turkey, however, can't be doing something against Russia on its own. It needs help. It needed the backing of the United States, which it has. You see the United States intervening right now militarily. We're bombing sites in eastern Syria to interdict the arrival of the popular militia units, Iranian-backed popular militia units from Iraq that are coming to reinforce the Syrian army. Ukrainian forces were brought in. Ukrainian forces brought their know-how regarding drone warfare. The Ukrainians are very good at drone warfare. If you look at the videos of how the HTS people are using drones against the Syrian army, you might as well be watching the drones being used against in Kursk or in the Donbass. The same tactics, the same equipment, the same style, the same weaponry. So the Ukrainians did this. They were trained up. Turkey, armed, equipped, made modern strike forces. They've been working with the United States and others to get the intelligence on the layout of where the Syrian army is, et cetera. This was all designed to happen in March. My understanding is this attack was supposed to happen in March. Why? Because that's when the Ukrainian government was supposed to launch its counteroffensive. And the idea was the Ukrainians would launch their counteroffensive, Russia would commit, and now Russia's tied down. And now this offensive comes in and Russia won't be able to respond. Iran will be tied down in a new administration trying to make peace, not war, and the Syrian army had been demobilized.
Mm.
And the idea was to strike fast, take advantage of the demobilization, and at a minimum sever the land corridor, creating a new geographic reality and geopolitical reality. Maximum create unrest that leads to the collapse of the Assad regime and the black flag rises over Damascus. This was supposed to happen in March, but the Israeli defeat at the hands of Hezbollah and this ceasefire created a panic on the part of Israel. So Israel demanded that the attack go early. And because Israel and Turkey are close strategic allies, Turkey agreed and the attack went early. Unfortunately, their strategic thinking was flawed. Russia isn't distracted by Ukraine. Russia's winning in Ukraine. The Russian Air Force was ready, maybe too ready, which might lead to believe that maybe Russia had some insight on the devastation that Russia's inflicting on Idlib right now is unbelievable. The harm they're inflicting on HTS leadership, on the Syrian National Army leadership. They're gutting them. They're gutting the sustainability of this war. On the front, the Syrian army was caught asleep. They've demobilized. But the rapidity in which Syria was able to get the 4th Tank Division and the Tiger force mobilized and moving within a day, moving up, was impressive. Hezbollah has dispatched troops despite the fact that they are tied down. And Iran immediately sent leadership and forces, special forces to advise, and up to 30,000 of these the popular militia out of Iraq. The HTS offensive has reached what I call its high water mark. What it has is what it has. It's not going any further. It's over. And now they're going to be pushed back and they're going to be defeated. And I believe that there's not going to be an Astana 2. I think that Turkey has killed Idlib and that the Idlib problem is going to be resolved once and for all. It may take months, but it's over for this little Turkic fiefdom in Idlib. It's the artificiality of this it's a cancer on the region, and I think that it's going to be resolved once and for all, which is going to lead to a larger effect because one of the things that Turks were hoping to happen is the collapse of the YPG or the Kurdish forces there. And in fact, they did defeat them north of Aleppo. They caused them to retreat, etc. But this is going to lead the Syrian army and the Kurds are going to come together. I think that there's going to be rapprochement that gives some sort of autonomy to the Kurds, but the borders will be controlled by the Syrian government. And that'll be the assurances the Syrians will give to the Turks that they will control the borders. There won't be any cross-border raids, but Turkey's going to, worry about the fact that there's a Kurdish autonomy in Syria that threatens Turkey because now the Turkish Kurds are going to want autonomy. That's a different story. And I think the United States will eventually be compelled sometime in the next year to leave Syria. This is a strategic game changer, not the direction that Israel or Turkey wanted it to go. This is a defeat for Israel. Look what Israel did. They negotiated a ceasefire with Hezbollah because their army can't sustain that fighting. And yet, barely a day after this offensive started, Israel panics and said, oh my God, we're going to have to open up a second front against Syria to keep the 4th Division from going north, to keep Tiger Division from going north, to keep the Syrians from reinforcing, because we're losing and we can't lose. And they lost. They've lost. They're not going to sever this corridor. Hezbollah is not going to be strategically defeated. And it's a disaster for both Israel, but the biggest one it's a disaster for is Erdogan and Turkey. Who can trust Erdogan after this? He's been exposed as a hypocritical liar, a man whose handshake and word is meaningless. The only good news for Turkey is that they're too big to fail. They are a regional power, and Russia is a neighbor. Russia will have to learn to live with them. Iran is a neighbor. They'll have to learn to live with them. Syria is a neighbor. They'll have to learn to, but they'll never trust them again. Erdogan has lost all credibility in that regard. But that's my take. And again, I want to preface it by saying I'm thousands of miles away. I'm reading things. It's my interpretation of what I've read. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I think I'm headed in the right direction.
No, no, you spoken as if you're a local, actually, Scott Ritter. Your analysis are spot on. It's how we also view things in the area here, living in the area and living through all the situations through the decades, not just this conflict, but all the prior conflicts. So I must applaud you for your spot on analysis. I'm glad you touched upon Turkey because they seem to always be slipping through the cracks with everything that's been happening in the area. And I believe it's about time analysts like you are doing right now also touch upon Turkey and their role and their duplicity and how 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 impactful they are on events in the area, and it's not just Israel. Four things regarding Turkey from my side. One, on the one hand, they are co-signatories on the Astana Accords on Syria, along with Russia and Iran. Yet they've always and have never stopped funding, arming, training the Syrian opposition fighters and boosting them over with mercenaries from the Turk regions of Asia, as you mentioned. Two, about Turkey. Erdogan, on the one hand, professes his support for Palestinians, trying to portray himself in Turkey as the ultimate protector of the Palestinian cause, and not it being Saudi Arabia, because they're also try to portray themselves as that. But then 13 months now into the genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza, he has not lifted a finger. And on the other hand, he has never stopped closely cooperating with Israel over Syria, as it's clearly manifested with the events happening right now, which are, clear to even the most naive of observers. Three, Turkey has the Russian S-400s, and at the same time, they want to order the US F-35 fighter jets. And four, not to mention how they're masterfully always fluctuating between the US and NATO and between Russia and BRICS. So Turkey, in our eyes, it's not just Israel, is the most untrustworthy partner, yet everyone keeps giving her a pass for all these years. For how long will Turkey's duplicity be tolerated? I don't know, but it's about time people wake up. The governments there know, they're all in on it. Russia is in on it. They all know about Turkey. They're not stupid. Putin isn't stupid. The Americans are not stupid, but they're all in on it because Turkey satisfies their objectives just by being there in that position geographically and regionally.
Yeah, I'd add a fifth one for Turkey too. What it's doing in Libya.
Ah,
Sometimes people think that that's too far away, but it actually, I mean, you're in Cyprus, so you know exactly what I'm about to say.
oh yeah.
Um, the delineation of a maritime border between Turkey and Libya has changed the geopolitics of the Eastern Mediterranean tremendously, and it enables Turkey to redefine areas of economic, its economic zone because Turkey has occupied, northern Cyprus. There's the
33% of our country is under occupation, 50 years now.
right in.
I'm a refugee in my country here.
Well, I'm sorry for that. Turkey, it uses its position in Cyprus now and this redefined maritime border to claim sovereignty over areas that are used in oil and gas exploration. And I think the Eastern Mediterranean's future is going to be largely defined by oil and gas exploration. That's the next economic development for all the nations there. And Turkey has, what it does in Libya. And it's important to bring up Libya too to understand, for people that don't study the history of, for instance, the end of the Ottoman Empire. I point out people are like, well, why is Turkey in Libya? And I said, well, in 1911, 1912,
Yeah.
Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, before he became Ataturk, it was Mustafa Kemal, Enver Pasha, and other senior military people went to Tripoli and fought against the Italians because Libya was part of the Ottoman Empire, and indeed the area Tripolitania has always been very close with the Turks. There's a historic connectivity there. And the Turks resent the fact that at the end of World War One, this territory was taken from them. You ask why Aleppo? Well, the Vilayet of Aleppo, when at the end of the World War One, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, um, the Turks viewed Aleppo as an extension of Anatolia proper. It wasn't part of Syria. It's not part of the Arab world. Aleppo is Turkish. That's in their mind. Mosul, the Vilayet of Mosul, again, Turkish, not Arab, etc. And the Turks are resentful that French and British men in a room drew a line on a map that gave away these Turkish provinces and only because Turkey was weakened by World War One and the the Turkish Revolution, which again a big war with Greece. Nobody talks about it, but it was a big deal, the Turkish-Greek War. But today we have a leader, Erdogan, who is redefining himself as this not just pan-Islamic, but pan-Ottoman. He wants to bring back elements, and a large part of what motivated Turkey to agree to this ridiculous plan to take Aleppo is that he believes Aleppo is Turkey's. It belongs to Turkey. The same thing. The Turks continue to maintain a presence in northern Iraq that nobody talks about. It's because they say that Kirkuk, Mosul belong to Turkey. So,
with their 2016 and 2018 and 2019 invasions in Syria, with the guise of offsetting the threat of the ISIS terrorists, really their invasions were to quell any aspirations the Kurds had at the time for nationhood, being they were emboldened by the wealth and by their association with America. They're also now occupying, with those three invasions, 8 to 10% of the northern part of Syria. It's not just Iraq.
no, I mean, the Turks are an expansive people, and Azerbaijan, again, people, you know, the Turks at the end of World War One, while they were getting beat in Palestine, launched a major offensive that occupied Baku, uh, captured Azerbaijan, captured Georgia, Batumi, and were moving into the Caucasus region. They were up in Dagestan area, uh, and they have their eyes on that. I mean, the Turks consider Batumi, which is a Georgian city, to be part of Turkey, and Baku they consider to be part of the pan-Turanic empire. So, and then we don't even get into what they're talking about when it gets stretching this pan-Turanism all the way across Central Asia through Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, into China and the Uyghurs. This is Turkey is a very complicated country with complicated visions that can't be ignored, and that's the problem. It can't be ignored. It doesn't mean you have to like them and all that. You can't ignore them. Russia has to do business with Turkey. Syria has to do, and you can't eliminate Turkey. It's there. Iran will have to do business with Turkey. Europe will have to do business with Turkey. Um, it's there. The problem is doing business with Turkey is never simple, and it's never what it seems. The Turks will have an angle on everything that has nothing to do with what you're talking about, everything to do with their alternative visions of what the world should be. So
big subject. It warrants.
I just lost all my Turkish friends, but
Yeah,
it's not that I'm not anti-Turk. I lived in Turkey for 2 years. I love Turkey. I love the Turkish culture. I love the Turkish food. I love Turkish history. Uh, I'm a great admirer of Turkey, but that doesn't mean, just like I'm an American, I love my country, I love my history and all that. But it doesn't mean I support bad policy.
exactly.
And just because I love Turkey doesn't mean that I'm a blind supporter of what is bad policy.
And violation of human rights happening across the board, also within the country. It's a big subject. It's something that warrants us touching upon it, maybe on a separate episode, because Turkey
Sure.
is a big player and people are completely disregarding it. I want to ask you, I just want to mention that meanwhile, I just want to touch upon Gaza just briefly. I just want to say that, meanwhile, the indiscriminate killings of civilians continue in Gaza, and it's all taking a back seat, on all channels, mainstream media and social media, like to the developments in Syria, purposely so, one might rightfully think. And that's really sad, really sad. It saddens me, and I just like your brief thought on the matters.
Well,
Tragic
I've
what's
I've
happening.
said I've said this all along. Anybody who's followed me from the beginning of this conflict, people said Hezbollah needs to decisively intervene. I said the moment Hezbollah does that, we'll never talk about Gaza again. Iran needs to attack Israel. The moment that happens, we'll be talking
Yeah.
about energy security. We'll never talk about Gaza
You
again.
did, you did, you did.
And if you care about Gaza, if you care about the Palestinian people, if their sacrifice is to mean anything, because they have sacrificed so much, so much. If this sacrifice is to be anything other than just a continuation of the murder that takes place every day in the Middle East, I don't mean to apologize. I apologize. I understand Middle East isn't an appropriate term anymore. It's West Asia. I don't
No,
want to. I
no.
want to be politically correct, but yeah, I use Middle East just because that's what I was raised to
So,
say.
so do we. I don't know who's trying to
Okay.
redefine.
A Pakistani friend of mine said, no, 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 it's West Asia. You can't use the term Middle East anymore. It's
No,
politically
no,
incorrect.
no, no,
But
no.
so I just don't want to insult anybody. I'm just old and I'm set in my ways. But the fact of the matter is, the whether you like Sinwar or not, whether you are supportive or not, you have to respect the fact that he had a vision, and it's a horrible vision because it was a vision of Palestinian statehood that can only be won by making Israel be exposed as Israel, the reality of Israel. For far too long, the Palestinians had to deal with these short conflicts with Israel, where Israel uh, briefly revealed to the world who they really are, but then the conflict ended. And so the world was never confronted directly with the horrific reality of what the essence of Israel is. Look, when Moshe Yaalon, the former defense chief of staff, defense minister, when I knew him, and I know him personally, he was the head of Israeli military intelligence. This is a serious player. This is a hawk. Let's not pretend that Moshe Yaalon is a dove. He's not. He's not a look. He's not a labor guy in disguise. He's a Likudnik. He is, hardcore defender of Israel. When Moshe Yaalon says that the Israeli army is not a moral army, that the Israeli nation is not a moral nation, that means Israel has gone. Some people say it's gone off track. What I say is Israel has exposed its true essence to the world. Israel was always this way, but it was able to fool itself and fool the world. But you can't have Zionism that's predicated on stealing land from millions of people and be a moral nation. And you can't enforce Zionistic practices and call yourself a moral army. Israel's not a moral nation. Their army is not a moral army. Sinwar knew this. How? Well, he spent what, 11 years in prison, or maybe more. I got to go back and recalculate. But he spent a lot of time in prison. That's what made him the threat because he knew Israel inside and out. He knew how they think. He knows what motivates them. And this knowledge led him to come up with a plan. That plan was to initiate an attack on October 7th, 2023, that so shocked Israel that they would expose themselves to the world, the truth of Israel. But the truth of Israel is that it's a murderous, genocidal state. In order to expose that truth, Israel would have to commit murder, genocide on a massive scale. And Sinwar knew this. He took hostages in large numbers because he knew that that would inflame the passions of Israel and get the Israeli public to expose who they really are, which are a nation that views Palestinians as animals, human animals, to be slaughtered as animals. Sinwar did this because he understood this was the only viable path to a Palestinian state. Without this, Palestine was dead. And everybody who knows this, on October 6th, nobody was talking about Palestine. Nobody was talking about Palestine. It was gone. The Abraham Accords had killed it. Israel was about to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. And that would have been the end of it. Sinwar took an action that resulted in Israel exposing itself as Israel. And the Palestinian people have paid the price. And it is a price that is horrific, beyond comprehension, shatters the soul, shatters the heart. But it's not a price that is meaningless if the vision of a Palestinian state becomes reality. Sinwar did this. And he started this. Now he's dead, but Palestine is, Gaza exists. It's not being talked about right now. Israel hasn't changed. They're still mass murdering. The genocide is ongoing. Worse, they're starving people to death. They've isolated people in northern Gaza. They're starving to death. Every day they bomb tents, they bomb shelters, they bomb houses, they murder innocent civilians, and no one's talking about them because all you people that wanted a bigger war, well, you got it. You got it right now. You got a bigger war in Syria, and Gaza isn't on the radar at all. You've disgraced the sacrifice of the Palestinian people. What you've done is made sure that Hind Rajab's death is meaningless. She was a symbol, a 6-year-old child murdered by the Israelis that proved what Israel really is. Her death alone shows you what Israel is, a maniacal, genocidal state capable of murdering a 6-year-old innocent child. And yet we're not talking about her because we're talking about this larger conflict in Syria. Ladies and gentlemen, do not lose focus.
Yeah.
If you say you care about the Palestinian people and you care about Gaza, never let it slip your lips. Keep it on the front line, on the front pages. And I'm not saying this because I dislike the Syrians, but Syria is going to survive this.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about this. So let Syria do its thing. Don't lose sight of Gaza because the deaths that are happening today should be front page news.
Yeah.
And you're not even going to find them referenced on, page 16 now because we're talking about something different. And that's for all you people out there that said you need Iran to do something. You need this. No, you don't. You need to respect the Palestinians in Gaza who have sacrificed everything, including their lives, their future, for the potential of a Palestinian state. You can't lose sight of this. That would mean all the sacrifice has been for nothing. For nothing.
No.
Sorry, I get a little.
No, thank you for that. It's the sad reality that it's no longer on frontline news, and Israel is continuing and unobstructed with everything it's doing. People think that possibly things there have been paused and maybe there are negotiations. No, the killings are happening, the slaughters, indiscriminate, everything. So thank you for that. I wanted to end with this question. The reality on the ground, which you pointed out to me at the very end of our first interview a month ago, is accelerating rapidly. It's no longer, week by week, it's a day by day, a reality that's rapidly changing on a day-to-day basis. So with so many active war fronts, it's very hard for most people to keep up. And I'm wondering, is this chaos intentional? In that, could it have anything to do with Trump taking office on January 20th? Are there players who are trying to rush things before that date arrive? As briefly as you can.
There's no doubt that there's an element. Trump is, first of all, it's difficult to quantify Trump because there's a world vision and then there's the fact that he's a tool of Zionism. He's built the most pro-Zionist, pro-Israeli administration imaginable. I mean, it seems that you have to be an outright Zionist in order to get in here. It's ridiculous what he's done here. But so normally I would say, for instance, what's going on in Ukraine and everything with NATO is you have the establishment seeking to Trump-proof their policies. That is to create chaos, create disruption, commit the United States to a policy course that Trump won't be able to disentangle. And in many ways, that may be what's happening here by getting the Turks and Israelis to prematurely initiate this offensive, designed to shape events in the Middle East that will make it difficult for Trump to come in with a plan. Because literally the entire Middle East map, the Levant map, is being redrawn politically and geopolitically as we speak. What Trump thought he was going to be dealing with and what he's going to be dealing with are two totally different things. And this is probably deliberate on the part of those people who are trying to Trump-proof, a policy. But again, it's difficult to say because he's put in the most pro-Israeli cabinet imaginable. So, these are people that have close ties to Israel, which means they have to be cognizant of Israel's strategic objectives in this offensive, which means that actually in the case of the Middle East, this might not be something that is designed to entangle Trump, but liberate Trump. So, who knows? He's just, I can't even begin to address objectively the political makeup of his cabinet because it's the most anti-American cabinet imaginable when it comes to Israel because it's literally sold out to Israel across the board.
Scott Ritter, thank you once again for your invaluable insights. For our viewers, if you found the content interesting, hit the subscribe and like button and share so that it reaches as many people possible. Also in the description, you'll be able to find info on how to connect with Scott. And I want to leave you all with this. Spread kindness, compassion, and love to your people and to those around you and to strangers. They're much needed in the world. Goodbye for now.